Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to help you navigate the turbulent waters of transitioning into a civilian career. If you're in search of meaningful employment, well, you're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. Okay, folks, let's roll right into today's topic. Are you actively seeking civilian employment and looking for a way to stand out? Have you struggled with how to best market your military skills for the civilian job market? You want to build an authentic and consistent personal brand that will help you launch a meaningful career after you've hung up those boots? Well, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, you're in the right place, so don't touch that mouse. Today's guest is an international personal branding and reputation management specialist, an accomplished consultant, speaker, and writer. She spends her free time empowering military veterans with the tools needed to compete effectively in a civilian career. She's here today, live from Colorado, to tell us what transitioning service members, veterans, and mil spouses headed to the civilian workforce need to know about personal branding. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lida Citroën. Lida, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lucas. It's great to be here with your fabulous audience.
And it's absolutely a pleasure to have you. And thank you so very much for your time. I think we're going to have a great show here. Now, all of you out there in LinkedIn land, now that you know who we are, we'd like to hear who you are. Jump into the chat with your comments, questions, or concerns. Let us know who you are, who you're with, who you served with, what your status is. Are you a Reserve National Guard, recently retired, getting ready to transition after first term of service, or something else that I just haven't thought of? Jump right in there with your questions and comments, especially your questions, and time allowing, we will get after them. Lida, personal branding. I'll tell you, I was out of the Army a long time before I even heard the term. This whole idea of marketing yourself was new and weird for me. But before we jump into that, and there's a lot to get after, can you tell the audience a little bit about your journey? How did you arrive at this place where you've become so involved in the military community?
Well, thanks for that question. You know, I spent 20 years in corporate, right? Building big company brands, product brands, service brands. And I pivoted to personal branding when I started my own company, working with entrepreneurs, business leaders around the world. But it wasn't until 2009 when I became aware of the fact that everything I'm doing to help professionals and executives and entrepreneurs position themselves competitively, that nobody was having that conversation with somebody coming out of the military. I had no personal connection to the military, no family member that had served in the United States military. So I was kind of walking blindly into this conversation, but I had a passion for those who've served, and I had an expertise I thought could be valuable. I started speaking at conferences, writing articles, writing books, mentoring and coaching anyone who reached out to say, what is this thing you're talking about, and how can I learn more? And as they say, the rest is history. It's been many, many years of, working with thousands of transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses who were passionate about telling their story and standing out in an intentional way from everyone else who might look like them.
And that, I think, is a challenge because, literally, I think the number is about 150,000 service members leave the service, the branches of the service every year, each molded to damn near be a replica of their predecessors, their peers, into that military mold. They're coming out of that now as a transitioning service member. What do they need to understand about personal branding?
Well, it is self-promotion. And I always say, don't shoot the messenger, right? I mean, I'm bringing this concept to a community that is taught the military values of service before self, right? You focus on mission. Everybody's got each other's six, and you're paying attention to those you serve alongside, not seeking, recognition and visibility. That's not the military culture. And I'm not saying it is the civilian culture, but how we compete in the civilian sector looks different. If you're just relying on a resume, which lists off everything you've done before, you're missing the opportunity to take control and define your value, define how you want people to perceive you, and then seeking opportunities that align with that. And it's a big disconnect. I see the blank stares when I'm having this conversation, and service members are like, "You've got to be kidding me. I have to go toot my own horn." It's not about a billboard with flashing lights, but it's about being intentional and strategic. And the name of the game with personal branding is consistency.
Yeah.
Not perfection, but consistency. And if you don't do those things, it's very easy to get passed up. Service members today coming out of the military, whether they're retiring or they're exiting, they're not only competing against civilians, but they're competing against other veterans. And so having that value proposition is really important.
You're absolutely right. Now, for those who decide that this is all just a bunch of guff and they're not interested in playing games with branding and LinkedIn and value propositions, and hey, I've got a great, amazing military career, it'll stand on its own, and I don't need to play with this branding business. They're basically opting out. And what happens when you opt out of a personal brand?
Well, there's a line that I'm well known for, and it's something I said years ago, that everyone has a personal brand by design or by default. If you think about your personal brand as what you're doing to tell your story, how you're showing up, people are forming perception about you based on what they experience, right? You sound like someone I might want to listen to. I've heard that you have some great skills. Perception is a tricky thing. And sometimes I say I'm in the perception business, because perception is that quality that other people hold that they use to base opinions about us. And perception can be tangled up with stereotypes and biases and beliefs. And sometimes those perceptions are very wrong. What if I have a perception about somebody who served in the military that's not accurate? Right? I represent the 98% in this country who have not served. I go even further, that I didn't know anyone in the military, or even have a friend who knew someone in the military. So if you try to compete in an environment and form perception with someone who might have, beliefs formed by what I've seen in the movies, right? I thought military meant y'all flew fighter jets like Tom Cruise, right? That's my perception. So knowing that, what personal branding allows you to do when you're strategic about it is drive that, manage perception.
And I actually used to use one of those perceptions in interview questions. When sometimes in an interview, you'll get asked the question, what is your leadership style? And I would say, hey, that gunnery sergeant in full metal jacket screaming at everybody and beating people up and choking Private Pile, you know him? And they'd kind of go like, this is nothing like that. Absolutely. Not even close. I said that. So, but for some people, unfortunately, what they've ingested from Hollywood, Medal of Honor, Charlie Sheen, Tom Cruise, the sniper movies, the SEAL Team 6, often many make the mistake of thinking that this hard edge alpha personality that just wants to blow stuff up and wear Velcro and chew Copenhagen is what they can expect when they hire a vet.
Or take that one step further, because I've heard from employers that, well, they're going to need to be told what to do all the time, right? So it's not the barking orders or, command and control and talking with knife hands. It's, are they going to be are veterans going to be independent thinkers? Can they work creatively and in a team as well as independently? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We're talking about the most trainable community we have in the workforce. So they, when somebody gets into the military, you all weren't trained for what you ended up doing in the military. You got trained. So we can teach people how to be in the civilian sector, because y'all were civilians before you joined the military. So I think there is a lot of misperception, and being able to have these kinds of conversations with employers and recruiters and hiring managers makes it easier for us to sort of check as civilians our own biases, because again, perception can be wrong. And you as an individual, whoever's watching this, as a military spouse, as an active guardist or reservist or someone who's active duty, I see we've got a lot of folks that are getting ready to exit the military, piping in on the chat here. How do you want them to perceive you? the person you're going to be networking with, the recruiter you're going to sit down with, the colleague you're going to work alongside. Personal branding says, I want you to see me this way. It's authentic to who I am. It ties to my values. And if I'm driving that, now we're having a different experience. And I love that power because that also changes the narrative in the civilian space, right?
Okay. So let's say you've sold me. I'm a transitioning service member. I've watched some of your content. I've read a couple of your books. And I think to myself, all right, Lida, you sold me. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. How do we get started?
Well, it's not Kool-Aid. And we're kind of dating ourselves. I don't know if they still make Kool-Aid?
Somewhere.
But I think what you're talking about is, okay, so you're on board with the idea. Personal branding is all about you, right? It's about you knowing who you are, how you want to be perceived, and how you want others to experience you. And that starts with your values. And one of the trickiest things that I run into is when I'm speaking in a room full of service members and I talk about values, what I typically hear, these are my values, are commitment, honor, service, courage, duty, right? Military values. But when we think about personal branding, now it's about your values. And they certainly will likely dovetail into military values. That's why all of you raised your hand to serve. But let's strip that away and think about your values as a human being, as an individual. What do you stand for? And it might look a little different. Maybe it's bravery instead of courage. Maybe it's taking chances and taking risk instead of, a military value which you might have been taught. Being able to pull those apart is a really tricky process, but it's absolutely the foundation of personal branding, because who you are and what you stand for is where you build credibility. If your values match your actions, people will trust you. So here's an example, Lucas. When I said I started wanting to work in the military space, I had zero credibility. I had the values, but I hadn't done anything. There was no track record. There was no evidence that this was more than just something that sounded good, right? She's patriotic American. And it wasn't until I started doing those things like writing articles and speaking at conferences and military installations all over the country and writing my books and not charging for any of it, that people started saying, wait a minute, okay, her values are there. I see the action, and credibility starts inching up. But the tricky part, and this is the part that I always get pushback, is you have to make that connection. I had to tell people that it was my values of gratitude and generosity that were leading me to do this work. Otherwise, they could form a different opinion about why I was doing all of the work in the military.
Yeah. Maybe she's trying to make money off of us, or she's just looking for free press. And actually, that segues very nicely into a question from Zachary Pat. Zach writes, I'm transitioning and attempting a career field change. What is the best way to build my credibility in the field I'm trying to break into? I have my values. What actions can I focus on to increase that credibility? Great question and beautifully timed, Zach. Thanks for coming to us with that one.
Fabulous. And Zachary, I would also encourage you to consider that's your Facebook picture. If that's a picture on LinkedIn, think about how that might send a message to a civilian hiring manager. They tend not to like to see munitions. But your values put into action, if you're already identifying that those two are connected, then the more you talk about it, let's say honesty, Zachary, is one of your values, right? And you're having a hard conversation with someone and giving direct feedback that may not be nice to hear, but you're not sugarcoating it. Instead of just letting that live out there, mention why you're doing it, right? Your values are your why. So let the value live with the action. Tell that person, look, the reason I'm being honest with you is my value is honesty. And I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm going to tell you how it is. My responsibility for myself when I speak in front of a military audience is to say, I am here because I am grateful for your service. That is why I'm here, not because I'm getting paid or getting paid a lot or whatever, but I have to connect the value to the action. So the more times you do that on social media, in person, in job interviews, the more other people will start to make those connections. We're basically kind of lazy. What you tell us, we'll trust until we start seeing evidence of the contrary. So tell people what values are driving that action.
And I love that because it's deeds, not words. I believe there's a motto of a unit that I served adjacent to some years ago. Because there are a lot of people who say, now that I'm out of the military, I'm going to place my family ahead of all other things. Then they take that, Fortune 100 company job that works them 70 hours a week, and they travel once a month for work, and they run themselves down. And 10 or 15 or 20 years later, they're like, wow, my kids are all grown up. What happened? Your actions didn't line up with your values, or maybe your values weren't what you said they were. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of self-reflection is going to go a long way here.
Yeah. And to that point, the other follow-up to your question is have a sense of how you want to be perceived, right? Knowing that there are biases out there, knowing that there's misinformation, knowing that there's a lot of non-information, right? People don't know what they don't know sometimes. How do you want to be perceived? How do you want the expectation of that experience to be when somebody works with you, talks with you, connects with you on LinkedIn, whatever? That's driving your desired brand. Another way to think about it is, what's the ideal end state that all of this is working towards? You have served your country. You have done something most humans never get a chance to do, and it is exceptional and valuable and everything magnificent. But now it's about you. How do you want your military service plus what comes next to tell the story of who you are? If you're driving that, if you're thinking about that, then as you post on social media, as you're connecting with people, as you're interviewing and deciding what kinds of jobs and companies to pursue, that becomes your filter. And if it doesn't go through that filter, it's probably not a good opportunity for you.
That absolutely makes sense. Well, this is great. I hope our audience is enjoying this as much as I am. I want to harken back to experience I had in my career. Now, when you get a whole bunch of majors and young captains and light colonels and jam them into a room to do a planning session, we oftentimes would refer to that as making the sausage. You got to get in there and you got to grind it out. You got to put everything together. All right. Well, I had a commander who came in and went to one of our planning sessions, and he was distinctly unimpressed with what we were generating. And he slammed his fist on the table and says, it's not enough that you're in here making the sausage. You have to make the links, which was his way of saying, this is all great, but break it down. What's useful? What can we consume here? If we're building a personal brand, what are the elements? What are the pieces and parts? If my brand is a Lego house, what do the bricks look like?
Well, great question. And I often say there's the branding and then there's the marketing, right? So branding always comes before marketing, because branding sets the story, it sets the beliefs, and then marketing is what we do. So if you think about the branding as the values, thinking about how you want to be known, understanding who your people are, who's your target audience. Okay. There are certain people you're going to click with. There are certain people whose values and passions and work style aligns with yours. That's your target audience. And when you have all those ingredients, then you look at, how am I going to position myself? And we live in a world, and I mean world, this is not an American thing. We live in a world where we have a lot of tools at our disposal, including things like social media. How are you going to show up online? Is it consistent across all your social media? Are you more casual and relaxed and playful on Facebook, but you're more button up and serious on LinkedIn? Well, what if I see both of those? We want consistency. So your digital footprint, how you show up online, which in today's world is one of the first things we do, right? The narrative, your elevator pitch. There was a question in the chat about, is personal branding your elevator pitch? There you go. Natalie's question. Your narrative, the story you tell about yourself and who you are and how you want other people to see you, shows up in your elevator pitch. That's not the whole thing, but how you introduce yourself tells other people what they could experience from you. So narrative is a big part of that. The content that you share. Are you talking about the topic that you're interested in? Let's say you're moving from being an airline pilot, or a pilot in the military, in the Air Force, and now you want to go into logistics, or you want to go into project management. If you're making a shift like that, what is the content that you're talking about? If all you're talking about is aviation and being a pilot, but you're trying to convince me you want to be a PMP, the content isn't matching.
Right.
The people that you connect with, your network, who are you surrounding yourself with? Be really strategic about that. And then finally, your presence. When you do a video interview, is your eye contact good? Are you looking at the camera? Or are you looking at the people? Right? Big difference. Are you dressing for the part? Is your environment supportive? All of these touch points, when they're consistent, set the expectation. If you go to any of my social media channels or my website or read my books or see something where I was interviewed, you're going to see the same person that you're going to talk to if we got on a phone call. And that's what personal branding does, is the marketing is consistent.
Okay, so we've talked about sit down, be reflective, define your values, how you want to be perceived, how you want to market yourself. Now we've kind of segued into kind of the tools of the trade, and you've hit on LinkedIn. What are some mistakes, and I think there are many. What are some mistakes that people can make with LinkedIn, with how they are branding themselves?
I think the first is not thinking it through, right? LinkedIn is like having a mini website, but unlike a website, it is a dynamic platform. So it's a massive algorithm that, people, 77% of recruiters look at LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, you've just taken a huge chunk of the job search process out, but not being strategic. So one of the mistakes I see is people cutting and pasting their resume into the different boxes. Your profile picture should look like you today. It should have your face as the primary, right? So no animals, no spouses, no children, just you, well lit. And that's why I said, no big scary guns, because, that can send a different message. But it should look like you today, not 20 years and 20 pounds ago. That's a mistake. The headline that you put under your name, does it just list your job description or your job title, or does it tell me a little bit about what you care about and who you want to connect with? My favorite part of LinkedIn is the about section. And
Yes.
The biggest mistake I see is people list out their skills, or please don't write it in third person. It's your LinkedIn profile. It should be in first person. And they miss the opportunity to tell me more about you. You can attach your resume. You can attach all sorts of media to LinkedIn. But in the about section, that's who you are. That's why I would want to get to know you. Not one big massive paragraph. So chunk it up. You can use bullet points. I'm not a big fan of little cutesy emojis, but hey, if that makes you happy, do it. But really use it as an opportunity to tell people who you are. And as you continue to learn more about yourself as you transition, it's okay. Update your LinkedIn. Update it with new words or new terms that you're learning are popular in the industry you're going towards. Use it as a dynamic site. That's why I say it's a little different than a website. And then connect with people, get to know the people you're connected with.
One of the things I see very often, and I find myself having this conversation many, many times, and I'd like to hear your perspective, as I see people lead in their about section, and the first sentence sounds something like, transitioning Marine Corps veteran with 20 years of dynamic management experience in global arenas, facing highly complex problems, team building, and managing strategically. And then I look at it and I say, oh, okay, what does that even mean?
And yeah, the first four, the about section, they've got a new format where the first 4 lines, right? First, that can be harder returns in there too. The first 4 lines show up before somebody has to actually click the button that expands that section.
We'll see more.
Right. So you want those first 4 lines to say something interesting, right? And if it, again, it's just a regurgitation of your resume, or if it's using terms that sound great, but maybe leave the reader going, and like, what's in it for me? What would
Right.
I get if I connect with you or want to have a phone call with you?
Right.
Those
Like
are
I've never seen a job description that said seeking veteran with global management experience. Like, okay, that's not a job. In the
right.
military, it's a job, but out
Yeah,
here, it's not a job.
right.
We want what? Project managers. We want program managers. We need logistics professionals. We need
Mhm,
technicians. We need engineers. We need software developers.
mhm.
It's fantastic. Hey, look, make sure people understand where you're coming from. The fact that you're a military veteran is a part of your brand, right?
Sure.
But
It can be. I mean, it's part of your career, and you choose how much of your story you want to make that. I'm a big believer that it should be part of your story, but that's really where personal choice comes in, because I have met some individuals who said, their military experience was not positive, or, they don't really want to talk too much about it. So they might highlight it differently
mhm.
than somebody who has a different experience. So it's all about choice. You choose how much you want to highlight different aspects of your life.
Okay, so we've kind of dabbled in a few things here. We've talked about 30-second elevator pitch.
Right.
Where else can we be showing? We know of obviously LinkedIn. Where else can we be showcasing our brand? Where are the playing grounds, the battlefield? Can you kind of give me a survey? Where is the what does the battlefield look like for showcasing your personal brand? LinkedIn, 30-second elevator pitch. Where else?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
I mean, there's your short answer. I mean,
That's
the
a good
people
answer.
who know you, the relationships you invest in, do the people that you network with at job fairs, at events like your organization puts on, online, in person, social events, business events, military events. Do they know who you are, and do they know what you want and what you can offer? Because if they don't, you've missed an opportunity. That's your sales force. These are the people who, when they hear of an opportunity, will think of you if they know who you are and what you need and what you can offer. How you present yourself. So think about those touch points we talked about. They all carry equal importance. They might require different effort depending on where you are. The way you talk about yourself. I'm hearing a lot in my mentoring calls these days that self-talk is getting really negative. If you're not telling yourself positive, affirming, supportive messages, trust me, that is coming through in how you talk to other people. We know that about narrative. If I, tell myself I'm going to do a great conversation with Lucas, I'm going to share a lot of great information, I'm going to be myself and be authentic, then when I talk to you, that's how I come across. And the contrary works as well. So everywhere you show up, and it doesn't mean it's a lot of pressure. What I often hear is, gosh, this sounds like a lot of work. And building your brand, having those conversations and those deep introspective, questions, they can feel like a lot of work. But once you've done that, it actually becomes so much easier to introduce yourself to a stranger at a job fair, to answer a question in a job interview, to connect with someone on LinkedIn, or share some thoughts or content on LinkedIn. Those things become easier. Where they're hard is when we don't know what we want and what our goal is.
I think for many folks, it can be a matter of repetitions. If for example, you've ever been an instructor in one of our military schoolhouses, that first time you teach a block of instruction and it's supposed to be perfect, word for word, no deviation from the script,
Mhm.
you'll fumble and stumble and you'll miss some things and there'll be corrections. But after about the 35th time you've given somebody your elevator pitch or told them, answered the tell me about yourself question, or gone over what your professional goals are, I think it's going to roll. I think it's going to roll right off the tongue. Now, James, he asked the question, what about a career shift?
Mhm.
I have all my military experiences doing one thing and I want to do something totally different. How do I build my credibility?
And it's a great question that's not only for those who've been in the military, right? I do a lot of work with professionals and executives who are looking to make a shift. We call that a reputation pivot, right? You're well known for this expertise and you have a network over here and now you want to go over there. Look at the assets that you want to take with you, right? So if you're moving into a career that still works with the military, maybe you're going into defense or you're working in some support capacity to the military, then what are the terms and the skills and the exportable qualities of that experience that you want to take with you? What are the ones you can leave behind? Let's say you're making a big shift, right? I mentioned earlier, you're going from being a pilot to being a project manager, or you want to go from being a pilot to being a motivational speaker. I had that call recently. Then what are the new skills and the new relationships and the new words you need to use?
There you go. Yep.
So
New
it's
culture.
understanding what you want to take with you, because your career so far has been valuable, but what are the new things that you need to learn, the new people you need to connect with, and the new ways you need to show up, and then that creates your strategy.
And Herb Thompson, who you may also know in the transition space, one of the things having been in the special operations community for his career, one of the things he compares it to is the cultural training that you have to undergo, the cultural considerations as you go into a foreign environment. And now you're operating in an environment where they don't take Sunday off, they take Fridays off. They don't pray twice a day, they play 5 times a day. They speak a different language. Their heroes, their norms, the way they eat, sleep, breathe, and interact with each other is completely different. If you want to assimilate with them, they're not going to change with you. You need to understand and emulate that culture.
Yeah, one of the parts of, I did a TED talk on my work with the military and some of the things that I learned, and a lot of veterans have appreciated that message. But one of the things that really stands out for people is when I share my work with special forces, and just how you've got the bravest of the bravest of the superheroes that civilians perceive, and that what we're talking about now, taking that uniform off and going into a job search where sometimes those skills don't translate, right? Not a heck of a lot of need for a SEAL in the corporate world,
or a jump master.
Yeah, exactly. That could be terrifying. And I think the more that the civilian environment can appreciate really what that experience must look like, even if you served, whether it's 40 years or 4 years or 1 year, you made a commitment to do something that most of us never do in our life. And how does that translate when you come out and now you've got to compete with people who, went along their life in a different way?
Yeah, and for those of you out there who are struggling in the audience, don't feel bad. 6 years after retirement, I still don't know what to do with my hair. I'm still figuring it out. Lida, I wish we could go. I swear we could do a whole other show. I mean, it's fantastic. I just don't want to stop, but we do have a limit.
Okay.
Before we run out of time, if you had just one piece of advice, just one thing you could pass on to a transitioning service member, a mil spouse, or a veteran job seeker, like a 30-second elevator ride, what piece of advice would you leave them with?
I would remind them that transition is not a day. It is not the day you take the uniform off. Transition is a process, and leaving a culture and a community that is so familiar, that has so many rules and standards that you feel comfortable in, and going into this next chapter is a process. I talk to people who've been out for 5 years and they say, I still feel like I'm transitioning. That's perfectly normal. Continue to learn about yourself, ask good questions, listen to the input of others, but filter it all through what is right for you and your family and what you want to do with the next chapter of your life. You deserve to take control over that and to own and enjoy a meaningful career after you've served your country.
Solid words of wisdom. Lida, if folks want to hear more from you, see more of your content, hear more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
Well, I'm pretty much on every social media platform. My website is lida360.com. I do have some great resources. I think you can see over my shoulder a couple of my books. Your Next Mission, which is the book that I wrote all about personal branding for military. And then Success After Service, shameless plug, is the book that is a roadmap to exiting the military, including how do you position yourself to employers. But I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to be a voice to the military community who I have so much respect for. And I'm a very proud American because of your service and sacrifice. Thank you for my freedom.
Lida, thank you for everything you're doing for our troops out there when you spend time with them. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Absolutely.
And for those of you out there in the audience, if you haven't already done so, go to www.recruitmilitary.com, where you will find over 400,000 job opportunities from over 16,000 employers. We at Recruit Military are on a mission to help veterans, transitioning service members, and mil spouses find meaningful employment. And on behalf of Recruit Military and the folks that were kind enough to join us today, thank you, Lida, very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And be sure to tune in next week when we will hear from Ryan Smart. He will talk, he's going to be talking us through an after-action report of his transition from a military career to a career with the Ford Motor Company. We hope to see you then. This has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military Live. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.